Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
A Revealed Past by LyricalPiece. After docking at a new island, the Straw Hats are captured by a group of scientists who want to extract their memories to farm information. Realizing Sanji is a Vinsmoke, the scientists believe his memories are the key to stealing Germa's advanced technology. The cook's secrets of his past are revealed on screen, and his crew have a hard time accepting what they're seeing. Adios.
As it turned out, not every ship that passed by bothered with the barren rock floating in the middle of the ocean. It was too small to hold anything of value, even if it was just big enough to maroon two unfortunate cooks. It wasn't until Zeph was unconscious from fatigue, and Sanji on the brink of following suit, when a ship finally noticed them. They were rescued on the 85th day. 85 days? Are you fucking serious? Chopper, Robin admonished. She glared over at Usopp and Frankie, both instantly pointing accusatory fingers at Zoro, the resident foulmouth. They actually spent 15 more days in that nightmare, Nami said, shocked. The innocent reindeer doctor was rolling around in hysterics again. Luffy tracked him around the cell with a gleeful grin. Chopper's broken, he chortled. I told you Sanji was too stubborn to die, didn't I? Recovering after being on that godforsaken rock hadn't been easy, either. Half the crew that saved them had wanted the bounty money once they realized they'd picked up red-legged Zeph. The other half were arguing over how to feed people as malnourished as their new passengers. Chopper was biting at his hooves, hoping they had a doctor on board. Surprising everybody, it was Zeph, coming to even in his weakened state, who had all the answers. He was smart and charismatic, if not a bit intimidating, and directed the crew on what food to prepare, how much to feed them, and for how long each new increase of food should last. Flopping on his stomach, Chopper huffed a dramatic sigh of relief. Zeph had to restrain Sanji multiple times from gobbling everything he could get his bony hands on, saying it would only make him sicker. The food was carefully chosen depending on what nutrients and caloric intake were needed, especially when, as their bodies filled back out, Sanji continuously caught colds. His immune system had taken a brutal hit compared to the older man, and Zeph was there every time to call him an irritating brat and spoon the appropriate nutrients into his body. Sanji does that with all our meals, Chopper laughed, seemingly over his fit. Brook nodded. He must have learned it all from his mentor. He also seems adamant to keep our immune health up more than anything, Robin noted. I wouldn't be surprised if this particular devotion was due to this experience of him constantly being ill. Yeah, getting sick in the middle of the ocean isn't fun, Nami said. Maybe that's why Sanji felt so guilty that time I got sick. He blamed himself. Nami sighed. That dummy. Zoro had also lost count how many times the cook had yelled at him to put a coat on or get out of a body of water because he might catch cold. He chuckled darkly. Of course there was some traumatic reason behind it. In the meantime, Zeph had also managed to cajole the crew itself by cooking their meals for them and introducing them to an array of delicious foods out of the barest of ingredients. Young Sanji watched all this happen with awe. Watched the incredible, practiced skill Zeph had when he had gotten enough strength back to hold a frying pan. Watched as Zeph explained his process with confidence. Watched as the best food he'd ever tasted was served by a hard old pirate with a surprisingly soft heart. Watched as that food brought people together and made them happy. It was everything an aspiring chef could ever hope for, and young Sanji realized, in those moments, that he owed everything he had to Zeph. He had promised himself, no matter how long it took, he was going to repay him. In a flourish of memories, adult Sanji was back in Germa Castle, cursing himself for the trouble he brought to anyone unlucky enough to be associated with him. Luffy frowned. That's not right, Germa wasn't the problem here, he was. It was Zoro's turn to frown. He refused to bring down his crew because of his own problems. They had enough to deal with, going up against Kaido. One stray chef wasn't going to hinder them. They'd be fine. They had Mossy to protect them if anything happened. The unwavering confidence didn't come as a surprise to Zoro, as it was mutual between them. Didn't mean he had to agree with everything else, though, because he sure as hell didn't. This was his past to deal with. That was why he had come back on his own, alone. Robin sighed sadly. knowing at one point in time she had similar thoughts. Luffy and the others didn't deserve to be dragged into Vinsmoke family drama. It was bad enough that Zeph had. All because Sanji had screwed up and fell overboard that day. He shouldn't have been saved. The Straw Hats' hearts dropped. Sanji's presence didn't matter. The hell it didn't. Zeph would still be doing what he loved, with his leg, and Luffy would still become the king of the pirates. Luffy's hat dipped low, shadowing his face, but then a small smile appeared. Everyone caught it, as they had glanced over at their captain to judge his reaction to Sanji's thoughts, but only Nami had a hint of a smile, too. She knew exactly what he was remembering, and what was said that day. Ironic that it was the exact direction Sanji's thoughts had gone. Zoro narrowed his eye, curious. A chambermaid broke through Sanji's train of thought then, announcing that it was time to depart for the engagement ceremony at the Whole Cake Chateau, and in the next memory, Sanji was exiting the castle, donned in a fresh shirt, and bombarded with cheers from Germa soldiers and a seemingly endless rain of confetti. As if this was a happy occasion. In front of him was a coach covered in skulls, big enough for the entire Vinsmoke family to ride in. His father and brothers were already on it, and Ichiji offered Sanji his royal cloak, a red cape with gold lining that draped over one shoulder. Sanji put it on wordlessly before silently taking his seat between Niji and Yanji. Yanji glanced over at him. If you want to run, be my guest. Gives me the perfect excuse to chase you down and beat the crap out of you. PFT. Like he needs an excuse, Usopp muttered. You couldn't if you tried, Sanji retorted. Much to Zoro's delight, as he watched the green Vinsmoke's veins pop out of his head. What did you say? Enough, Ichiji interrupted, not in public. Yanji scowled but listened to his eldest brother. Giant cats pulled the carriage forward, and with the cheers of the crowd bidding them farewell, Sanji lit a cigarette. And so begins a new era for the Vinsmoke family, Judge said to nobody in particular. Wave to the citizens now, Sanji, go on. Beside him, Niji and Yanji snickered. They just can't help themselves, can they? Usopp said. Frankie hoped Sanji gives them their well-deserved, super ass-kicking sooner rather than later. Sanji ignored them, leaning his head back to stare at the ceiling of the Kali coach. He couldn't help it when his mind wandered, bringing up certain faces, the faces of that ragtag pirate crew he loved so goddamn much. Oh no, it's about to get sappy, Frankie knew, a handkerchief appearing randomly out of his abdomen. He pictured them all. Luffy at the lead with his obnoxious, endearing laugh. Zoro, dumb smirk on his face as he goaded Sanji on about something equally as dumb. Nami smiling brightly at the helm. Brook cheering everybody up with his music. Robin enjoying her book with an iced coffee in her hands. Usopp and Frankie tinkering away with a tray of specially catered snacks beside them. Chopper on his swing with a freshly baked cupcake. All so happy and free. Sanji, Chopper sniffled. My heart has never been fuller, said Brook. If I had a heart, that is. He thought back to Zoe, a reassuring smile thrown over his shoulder to ease sweet Nami's worries. I'll be back for sure. So, give everyone my best, okay? No, I hated that, Nami whined. That smile that haunted her every day until they saw him again. Crossing the sea with Capone Big and the Big Mom Pirates. There's not going to be a wedding, jackass. These hands have one job. To cook for my crewmates as long as they'll have me. I went through a better cook, and it was all for them. Everyone smiled at that, bittersweet. They could all relate, for they all had done the same, none of them ever really acknowledging it. Because it was simple. Obvious. Of course they'd go through hell for each other. Sanji needed to know that that included for him. Meeting Pudding for the first time. I really would like to marry you, but I'm afraid I just can't. I want to go back to be with my friends. Maybe what Sanji sought from the world was too much. Maybe he didn't deserve any of it. Not the friendship, and definitely not anything else. He inwardly chuckled, dark and humorless, as the face of a very specific swordsman encompassed his thoughts. Zoro stilled. Along with the image of the bandana-clad mosshead with a devious smirk over Watto's hilt, there was a deep, aching sentiment. He would never know how Sanji truly felt, and Sanji figured it was probably for the best that he'd hidden it so well. Sympathetic eyes turned to Zoro, whose steely gaze trembled. How far back? The other Straw Hats appeared beside the swordsman then, all laughing together. A faceless new cook among them. Sanji's eyes watered. He'd never have that back. A somber silence overtook the crew as they watched their cook struggle to contain emotions he had never shown before. Sanji can't be replaced, Chopper sulked, leaning into Luffy as the captain patted his head. Usopp covered his face. If he starts crying, I'll start crying. Sanji never cries. I can't watch it, I won't. It was over now. Sanji blew the apparition away with an exhale of smoke. Whether they'd be better off without him or not didn't matter. He would never regret meeting his friends, even if it was selfish. At least for a few years of his life he got to experience real kindness and true freedom. He should be grateful he got that much. That idiot, Zoro muttered, eye closing abruptly. That heartbreaking moron. And Zeph, who had sacrificed his own dream of finding the All Blue. Sanji remembered, before heading back to his post on the other side of that rock with a new sense of purpose even on the brink of death, what Zeph decided. That he would retire as a pirate and open his own sea restaurant. The memory skipped back to that moment, to a young Sanji and newly peg-legged Zeph standing on the deck of a brand new dream, the Bharati. Young Sanji yelled in excitement, bouncing from one foot to the other. Dang, you old fart. You really did it. Sanji's not that much older there, Robin noted, an aching solemnness still pressed in her voice. They must have worked really hard to get it going that quickly, Chopper said. Perhaps Zeph wanted a home for the aspiring little cook who reminded him of himself, Brooke suggested. The best way to perfect the culinary skill is to be constantly cooking, after all. And what better way than growing up in a restaurant? Are you ready? Zeph asked the boy he took in, smiling, because we're gonna be busy. We'll be just fine, Sanji promised, because you got me. Zeph's smile widened. The Straw Hats smiled with him despite themselves. Happy Sanji was contagious. And then the memory vanished. Sad Sanji was back, and he couldn't get over the fact that that man's life was on the line because of him. After all that old geezer did for him, this was how Sanji repaid him. None of this was his fault. Luffy objected, angry. Zoro agreed wholeheartedly with his captain. No, he wouldn't allow anyone to steal that old cook's last dream. Zeph sacrificed enough for me. More than he ever had to. More than anyone ever has, and the cuffs fell heavier on his wrists. It's my turn to make the sacrifice. He was bound to the Vinsmokes now, and soon he'd be bound to Big Mom. There were no other options left for him. Not if Luffy had anything to say about it. It's fine, he thought. It's better this way. He had his adventure. Now, it was time to come back to his reality. Because the thought of Vinsmoke Judge having his grubby hands in reach of Zeph or his crew was Sanji I, every part of Sanji's being froze. That voice, the carriage chauffeur stuttered. Your Majesty, something is charging towards us. All eyes turned to a now grinning Luffy. Usopp mumbled, you're making one of your entrances, aren't you? And the Straw Hat Captain curled onto his back, cackling like a hyena. Nami was not in the mood for her captain's cackling. I don't know why you're laughing, Luffy. If there was one thing Nami did not want to relive, it was what was coming next. She hoped that, maybe, Sanji's memory would just, she didn't know, skip over it. But no, it was too momentous for him, wasn't it? She groaned, head drooping. Is this, Zoro started, before stopping himself. If it was what he was thinking, he knew it had to be, out of any of the Go-Doffel memories. A memory Sanji would never want the crew, especially Zoro himself, to ever see. Nami, surprised, realized the swordsman knew what was about to happen. You know about this? Even Luffy seemed shocked. Zoro closed his eye to avoid the stares of the other Straw Hats. Not a whole lot of it, just that it happened. I thought you'd be more upset, eh? Maybe he was? Nami couldn't figure out why such an idiot was so hard to read sometimes. Before anyone could grow irritated by their cryptic conversation, that familiar laugh rang out across the meadow, loud, cheery, and completely unbothered by anything. Ha ha, long time no see, Sanji. It had been a long time, Luffy concurred, like he wasn't the one who had said it. That idiot. Yanji was gaping as much as Sanji was. He made it all the way to Whole Cake Island. And what's with that tree? It's running. Yeah, why is it running? Usopp echoed, as Nami cried. Oh, King Bomb. Sanji's alarm as he watched his captain approach only escalated as a sweet, feminine voice called out. "Hey, Sanji," Nami waved, orange pigtails trailing behind her as she sat atop the giant tree speeding their way. "We made it." More panic seeped into Sanji's bones. What were they doing here? Every fear he possessed washed over him like the wave that had stranded him all those years ago. He couldn't see if the others were near, but two were enough to utterly terrify him. "How amusing," Judge muttered from the front seat, as Reiju smiled over his shoulder to get a good look at Sanji's friends. In typical Luffy fashion, the rubber man flung himself at the carriage. He crashed into it and clambered up the side Yanji was sitting on, much to the green-haired Vinsmoke's bewilderment. "You're gonna tip over the Cali coach, you maniac," Yanji sputtered. Luffy was too giddy to care, having eyes only for Sanji. It was a look every Straw Hat knew well. Luffy loved seeing his nakama, especially after too much time apart. But it was suddenly disturbingly clear, as they watched the expressions flicker across Sanji's face, that their chef didn't see that look the same way the rest of them did. He didn't see pure joy. He saw blissful innocence. Like Luffy saw a version of Sanji that Sanji didn't believe was actually there. If they hadn't been privy to Sanji's thoughts through everything leading up to this point, they might not have noticed, let alone believed it. It was known, now, that the only parts of Sanji's heart that he seemed to wear on his sleeve were the positive parts. Suddenly, there was a whole darker half of Sanji they had become aware of. It was a little frightening. "Let's get going," Luffy was saying, excited. "We came here to pick you up. You said you'd be back, but I didn't want to wait, you know me," he laughed. Although Luffy's lips never stopped moving, Sanji could hardly hear him. His entire body pulsed with images. Islands and parties and dances accompanying the feasts he put his heart into creating for his friends were viciously mixed with Judge's constant reminders that his hands would be blown off if he stepped a single foot out of line. All his memories were suddenly tainted, poisoned. Laughter faded into threats, smiles into scars. And then Vito's whispered warning was back at his ear from that night in Bega's castle. "You know what happens if you're a no-show, Lalo." Sanji swallowed, sweat dripping down his neck. The head of someone I loved would be. His anxiety, Chopper started, fearful of the physical and psychological indications Sanji was giving off. It's eating him alive. The Straw Hats watched, a new perspective welded into their brains, growing more and more worried about their beloved cook the further his mind self-destructed. Zoro took a team and headed for the land of Wano. Luffy was still saying, completely oblivious, and Sanji's inner turmoil rampaged when hearing the swordsman's name. Scenes of warm skin and green hair fluttered around each other, then blended. Fighting with Zoro. Fighting alongside Zoro. Laughing with Zoro. Laughing at Zoro. Lingering touches he hoped Zoro wouldn't notice. The touches that lingered from Zoro's own innocent grazes. Zoro's face heated. He thought he'd imagined those times the cook would press into his shoulder too long when shoving past him or fingers grazing as he passed him a plate of food. And he sure as hell didn't think that dumbass noticed when he did the same. Zoro, with his head sliced at the neck and presented to him in a box. The Straw Hats' stomachs stirred at the morbid turn. No, they couldn't take Zoro. The Straw Hats needed him, and he had his dream. Tisk. Zoro scowled fully now, a sudden clarity breaking through as his own memory surfaced. The idiot cook wobbling his way between Zoro and Warlord Kuma on Thriller Bark. "Don't take his life. Take mine." Then, to Zoro. "If you die, what'll happen to your ambition, moron?" That day, Zoro was ready to sacrifice his own dream for Luffy's. He would have done if for any of his crew, because he had faith in all of them, and that was the job as the protector and first mate. But Sanji was always ready to do the same, and it was because he didn't see himself as worthy. If anyone should lose their life and their dream, Sanji believed it should be him, not his nakama. And he had told the swordsman to apologize to everyone for having to find a new chef. Like the trouble was the annoyance of losing a cook rather than the friend they loved. With a violent dread, Zoro realized that the greatest detriment to Sanji's well-being, from the very beginning, was Sanji himself. Sanji's heart was pounding. After Zoro, every memory of his life ricocheted through his head at top speed, intermingling and crashing into one another. Every pivotal moment. Every sadness. Every smile. Every loss, and every gain. Every touch sped through his mind. Blurring. Losing color. Losing shape. Just sound. Echoes. Calling his name, laughing. And then it cleared, singling out a solitary face. Zeph. Hey, Sanji. A Sanji from 2 years ago had his back to him and the Barati sack tossed over his shoulder, about to board a boat with the 3 strangers who would be his new crew. He was about to set sail for an adventure to the Grand Line as their cook, just like he always wanted. Just like that old man always hoped for him. So, he paused. Braced himself as he listened to the last words the man who was rightfully, truly his dad had to say to him. Maybe call him a brat one last time. Or, little eggplant. Just to embarrass him. Instead, Zeph smiled softly. Take care, don't catch cold. Sanji's memories faded out as he came to, focusing back on the Straw Hat captain clinging to the Vinsmoke royal carriage with ignorance behind his sunny smile. Because he didn't know, didn't see how much risk was involved. Luffy didn't understand. Present-day Luffy listened intently to the thoughts in front of him, attentive to the raw emotion his past self would see firsthand that day. The others were silent. Only Nami really knew what was coming, but every single one of them could sense the building tension. What they were witnessing in this moment, as trauma-induced anxiety dragged their friend deeper into the depths of his emotions, was a version of Sanji that hadn't existed in a long time. A version that could have reappeared at any given instance before Whole Cake, and could possibly resurface again in the future. It was little Sanji, lost and scared and vulnerable. And their hearts absolutely broke. Luffy on-screen was still talking animatedly, like it on the sunny and nothing was wrong. I was gonna come alone, but it turned into a whole thing. I know you just left, but you missed a lot. I'll explain more back on the boat. Luffy was laughing, and that was when Sanji's foot connected with his face. The Straw Hats stiffened. Some gasped. Nami closed her eyes, and Luffy didn't blink. Sanji! Nami shrieked. Sanji ignored her, still poised in his fighting stance. He stared down at his captain, eyes dark. Masked, Zoro saw. He knew their captain had seen it that day, too, instantly. And it wasn't masking pride, like Usopp, and it wasn't masking a lack of faith in Luffy, like Robin. 2 crew members who had disbanded for a short time for personal reasons. Although Zoro had never expected it to happen with Sanji, what he always assumed was that it was a hell of a lot different. It was obvious by Sanji's naturally selfless nature. It was backed by the little Sanji had confessed to Zoro in Wano. And now, actually seeing it, proved it all the more. What the heck's gotten into you? Nami demanded, voice shaking. There was a beat of silence as Sanji straightened. He knew there was no going back, and he needed Luffy to see that, too. Whatever it took, even if it meant becoming the very thing he swore to never become, a Vinsmoke. Oh, Sanji, Robin murmured, shaking her head sadly. Usopp tapped his feet nervously. This isn't gonna be pretty, is it? Sanji's glare tightened with his resolve. Leave my sight, he told them with all the authority of royalty. Bunch of low-class pirates. The shock that rippled through the 2 Straw Hats in front of him was clear as day. Ouch, Frankie muttered, while Chopper looked at Nami. No wonder you were so mad at him for a while. Nami groaned before sighing. It gets so much worse. It's fine, Luffy promised, not taking his eyes off the screen. Make no mistake, Sanji said, trying to drown out the sound of his brothers laughing behind him. Everyone glowered. Even acting as they would, his family mocked him. I have always been a Vinsmoke. Bile rose up Sanji's throat. Which makes me a prince of the Germa kingdom. He thought of his next words carefully. Saw the look that formed in Luffy's eyes. That stubbornness that he needed to crush. I kept all this a secret from you, because knowing about it would make things harder for you. Well, he did believe that, grumbled Usopp. It's noble of you to come all the way here to get me, but you wasted your time. I'm not leaving. Sanji tilted his head. I've already forgotten your name. Sanji's trying to be like his family, but he's never been so mean. What made him think Luffy would just accept that? Chopper questioned. Doubt Sanji knows how nice of a guy he is, Frankie said to the little doctor. Luffy met Sanji's glare with one of his own. Whatever, you liar, you think I'm gonna buy that? Yanji laughed in his face. Don't worry, Sanji, I'll help you drive him off. Sanji's palm came up to stop him from getting up. Don't you dare. He wouldn't allow anyone else near Luffy. And Luffy wouldn't listen to anybody else regardless. He needed to hear it from Sanji. I'll send him packing myself. Zoro shifted, agitated. This was headed in a bad direction. One strike at Luffy was enough condemnation, and Curly knew that. How many more would be at play here? What do you mean you'll send me packing? Luffy asked as he watched Sanji step down from the carriage and make his way over to him. I want you to leave. What else could I mean? The two scowled at each other, Sanji versus Luffy. Nami watched quietly from her perch at the top of the sentient tree, brown eyes blown wide, frightened. She should be, Sanji thought, sensing her fear without even having to see her. She shouldn't be here in an emperor's territory just for a runaway cook. Luffy shouldn't have put her in harm's way for him. Nami pursed her lips. It was her decision, and she'd do it again if she had to. Dunno why you thought this was a good idea, Sanji said, fists clenching. Couldn't have been easy to get here, so, I know you must want me back. Though he couldn't fathom what made them think one cook was worth the trouble. One of you tell him he's irreplaceable, damn it. Frankie pounded his fists. But having said that, if you really value my happiness, don't you have all this backwards? Frankly, you guys are poor and weak. Especially compared to the big mom pirates who are generous enough to take me in. He's simply reiterating things his family has told him at some point, Robin noted quietly. So why would I ever choose you? Luffy seemed taken aback for a moment. Zoro gritted his teeth as the cook's sharp-shooting words had their intended effect on Luffy for once. Even if he did understand Sanji's reasoning, it didn't make it any easier to watch. Sanji appraised Luffy's falter and, unfortunately, his recovery. How was he supposed to get the message through the Straw Hat's unshakable tenacity? How could he truly prove he was too terrible now to risk anything for? These are the big leagues, Sanji said. It's only human nature to pick the winning side, you know? You being king of the pirates, everyone tensed, is a pipe dream. Nami was suddenly pissed, if more than a little confused. You think this is funny or something, Sanji? Nothing you're saying makes any sense. I imagine how startled you two must have been, Robin said, noticing how Nami was shrinking slowly into herself. You went through so much to get to him, to bring him back, and he rejects you so coldly. Not at all like Sanji, Brooke added. Makes me relieved I wasn't present for this. Yeah, Nami agreed, resting her chin on her knees. Somehow, it hurt even more knowing Sanji's reasoning. She couldn't understand how she had fallen right for his act. She was usually more observant than that. But even Usopp at his lowest hadn't insulted Luffy's dream. How was she supposed to take it? Finally meeting the navigator's eyes for the first time, Sanji's own blazed a deathly cold. As they watched the Nami on-screen shrink back from their cooks emanating hostility, everyone's brows rose high on their foreheads. They'd never thought Sanji would be capable of looking at a woman that way, let alone one from his crew. Nami shuddered seeing that look again. The cook couldn't allow Nami to get under his skin any more than he could allow Luffy. If he had to be the bad guy, that was fine. So, Luffy said calmly, bringing the attention back to him. We were never really friends? You were fooling me all this time? The Straw Hats heard his skepticism loud and clear, and there was a sense of relief that he was seeing through Sanji's charade. The relief was short-lived, however, because Sanji could be just as stubborn as their captain when he fully believed something was the right choice. Sanji didn't hesitate at Luffy's questioning. That's right. Sorry, never thought much of you at all. His right leg ignited into waves of orange. Yanji was laughing again, and Niji moved to get a better view. I'm glad we got front row seats to this. They know he doesn't want to do this. They have to, Chopper said. And they're enjoying his torment like always. Their mere presence is a pressure on our cook, as well, Robin added. If he doesn't get Luffy and Nami to leave, then he knows they will. Nah, they wouldn't have. Luffy waved his hand dismissively. I wasn't leaving without Sanji, no matter what. Robin smiled gently at him. Of course. Sanji knew Luffy didn't believe him, knew he wouldn't listen. Needed something to prove that he wasn't, couldn't be, a Straw Hat. Is it hard to accept? Sanji asked his ex-crewmates. I imagine you two didn't see this coming, so I'll prove it to you. Get ready. He narrowed his eyes at Luffy, who narrowed his eyes back. The Straw Hats never thought they'd see their captain and their cook going head-to-head like this. The looks they were giving each other made their stomachs churn more than they already were. Usopp idly wondered ihe others felt when he fought Luffy, something he wasn't proud of and would really like to forget. Maybe Sanji also wanted that, And here everybody was watching it from his own mind. Usopp suddenly felt doubly sick. "Now, no, Sanji, don't do it," Nami screamed, but Sanji had already shot himself forward in a fiery display. Diable Hambi. Luffy didn't even try to deflect the attack. Took Sanji's flaming foot straight to his face again. The Straw Hats flinched. This wasn't like watching Sanji fight an enemy. This was their captain. This was Luffy. Nami screamed as Luffy soared backwards. The captain caught his landing and slid to a halt. Blood spurted from his nose, and he panted as he spat out a tooth. "What the? If you weren't going to dodge, why wouldn't you at least use Haki?" Usopp couldn't imagine seeing a ball of fire coming at your face and just letting it hit you. The idea hurt his nose just thinking about. "Didn't need Haki," Luffy said, low and serious, unnerving Usopp more. Zoro side-eyed his captain quietly before returning his gaze back to the memory. Sanji's composure faltered, if only for a split second. Then, he was angry. "I said, get ready, if you don't use your Haki, you'll die." "He wants so badly not to do this," Nami murmured. "Why couldn't I see it before? Why is it so obvious now?" "What do I need Haki for?" Luffy responded, just as calm as before. "I just want to talk to you. You're my friend. I'm not gonna fight you." Usopp bit his lip. Luffy fought him. Sanji's nostrils flared. Luffy was making this more complicated than it had to be. "Do what you want," Luffy continued, unnaturally monotone. "I won't fight." "You won't fight?" Frustration shook Sanji's bellowing voice. "Then go away." Luffy carefully watched, eyes hard as steel, as Sanji launched himself again. "Not happening. You're stuck with me." Selfish, as usual. Sanji's leg rose. "Alright then, have it your way." His foot cracked against Luffy's skull, sending the rubber captain tumbling through the tall grass of the clearing. But he once again reclaimed his balance and remained on his feet. Both men were panting now, adrenaline pumping. The memories of their first meeting swarmed the air around them. Wide-eyed. Wide smile Luffy pestering a kind-hearted cook with a cool air about him. The men, currently, were older and more worn compared to the two boys from the past. The contrast was almost heartbreaking. "Sanji, please stop this." Nami's voice snapped Sanji out of it for a moment, and he glanced up at the woman, who was now desperately trying to reach the Sanji she knew had to still be in there somewhere. "We don't want to fight, we just want to help, don't you get it? Luffy fought all night against one of Big Mom's strongest generals to get here. He's in no shape to do this." "Nami, cut it out," Luffy snapped. "Stay out of this, okay? It's between us, we're having a duel." Quickly masking his onset sadness with more anger, Sanji growled. "Oh, that's what you think this is, huh?" The sky darkened as Sanji's foot lit up even hotter. He charged. Luffy braced himself as Sanji collided with the side of his stomach, ribs snapping on impact. Again, Luffy remained standing. Like he had something to prove. Like as long as he was on his feet, Sanji was coming home. Sanji hated it. He hated the stubborn asshole. Hated how he wouldn't make this easy. Sanji just wanted him to lay down and give up. Get the hell out of harm's way and take Nami with him. But his captain, ex-captain, he had to keep reminding himself, wasn't having it, and it was infuriating. How was Sanji supposed to get it through his thick skull? By kicking it open? Sanji wasn't worth all this. Luffy needed to get Nami out of here, and get back to his crew. They're the ones who needed him. They're the ones who deserved his help, not Sanji. The Straw Hats' frowns sharpened. This was the difference, wasn't it? Usopp thought. The sniper knew that when he left, it was because of his pride. He couldn't accept their captain's decision about Mary, and selfishly went against him for it. Challenged him to a duel himself. Sanji left and fought for a selfless reason. Because that was exactly the kind of person Sanji always was. And Luffy knew it wasn't the same. Knew something different had to be done. Usopp couldn't blame him for that. With a rush of fury, Sanji leapt forward with every ounce of strength he could muster. Kick after kick, Sanji attacked. Each hit harder than the last, pleading, praying, he wouldn't have to do another one. However, Luffy never fought back, took every hit without a flinch. And Sanji, God Sanji wanted it to stop. "Get out of my sight," Sanji demanded, louder, the succession of his kicks speeding up. "Luffy, I'm done with you, please." A kick to the stomach. The head. The shoulder. Luffy never blocked, never dodged. The leg. The jaw. Scram. The nose, the ankle. Beat it. That's enough. Nami was yelling, but her voice was distant to them now. Just another ache in the atmosphere. Zoro had to force himself to keep watching, steel gaze steady. Like thriller bark, he took it all in. If they went through it, so would he. I said. Sanji's heart pounded painfully against his chest. I don't want anything. His blood boiled in agony with each swing of his leg. To do with you. Kick after kick, hit after hit, Luffy held his stance, facing his cook and absorbing each blow, until the bitter end. Nami was sobbing. Sanji, stop, I can't take this anymore. The tears among the Straw Hats were silent and painful, but the break in their navigator's voice tore their hearts open further. Everything about this was painful, from every angle, from every perspective. Nobody was going to win, because it hurt them all, and they knew it. On top of it all, Sanji had now made Nami cry. Hurt her to the point of tears, and he felt nauseous. Inwardly, he cursed. Luffy needed to surrender, for everyone's sake. I'm only gonna say this one more time, go, away. Sanji crouched, and his foot shot up under Luffy's jaw with incredible force. The rubber man flew the furthest yet, and yet, sandals digging into the soil, he stayed on his feet. Body broken and bruised and bloody, he met Sanji's scrutiny once again, unwavering. I'm not leaving. Ever so slightly, Sanji's eyes widened, flashing with a profound mix of rage, hurt, and confusion, because why? Why wouldn't Luffy let him go? Was he that important to him? Yes. The Straw Hats wanted to yell. To strangle their love into him if they had to. It didn't make sense. And it didn't even matter anymore. He had attacked his own captain. He couldn't go back now. He couldn't be trusted by Luffy, by the crew. Zoro wouldn't ever forgive him for this, and Luffy shouldn't either. That was the point. Zoro closed his eye with a quiet sigh. Luffy needed to see that his life was not worth endangering the crew over, because he had betrayed them all by this one action. Luffy had to get out of here, and the longer he stayed, the more Sanji saw himself in his captain, broken and bruised and bloody. Sanji's actions were his brother's, and he'd never felt sicker. This was too hard. He didn't want to do this anymore. He needed to end it, right now. In a wave of frustration, another instant blow to the face had Luffy finally falling onto his back by the sheer force. He went to push himself up, but paused when he saw a new look on Sanji's face. Seems I can't run you off, huh? You stubborn cockroach. Sanji's face went void of all emotion. There was no passion. No tangible sentiment. It was as if he, in that moment, had broken. The crew's hearts dropped. Alright, if you're not gonna buzz off on your own, you leave me no choice. I'm not holding back anymore. Don't blame me if you don't survive. Sanji started twirling his body until he reached an absurd speed. His foot lit up as he spun, and when he was finished, coming to a swift stop, his leg erupted in the brightest flame yet. Eyes widened, never seen this move beforehand for a finale. Nami panicked. Sanji, don't do this. Here we go, Sanji slowly said, so slowly. In hopes Luffy would fight back this time. Or run. Anything to not die. Just kill him, even, put them all out of this misery. Zoro nearly growled, and Luffy's face darkened as his hat shadowed half his head. The captain was insulted he'd even think he would consider that. But no, then Judge would seek revenge for ruining his plan, so. Zoro did growl this time. Back to worrying about how losing his life would negatively impact others, and not because they were in mourning or anything, that moron. No matter what choices Sanji made, no matter how much he tried, Sanji's life was an inevitable loss. There was no winning. He shot himself into the air. And there was no going back. The island of green hills and bright trees was a sharp contrast to Sanji's turmoil as he shot himself high into the clear sky, the wind warm on his face. It was a perfect day when it shouldn't be. He airwalked higher and higher until he was a distant dot in Luffy's sight, barely feeling the breeze against his skin by the time he found a spot to hover. Everything felt numb. Please, Sanji, you don't have to go through with this, Nami cried desperately from her perch, tears cascading down her terrified face. We'll go, okay? Just don't hurt Luffy. Sanji locked onto his target and began to descend. Whatever the lovely navigator was saying was out of reach now. Nami pressed her face into her knees. She wouldn't watch this, not again. Using his airwalk technique, Sanji pushed himself downward faster, flames trailing him like a meteor about to strike the earth. Luffy growled, staring down the attack head-on. "I'm not leaving." "Tell me you're gonna use Haki at least," Usopp squeaked. Sanji gritted his teeth, tucking himself into his body to spin forward, somersaulting rapidly. Past Luffy's voice was suddenly in his ear. "Hey, Mr. Cook, care to join us? You'll be the chef on our pirate ship?" Faster and faster he spun, until he was nothing but a wheel of fire. "You're a good cook, and I need one. Obviously we should be pirates together." The disparity between that round-faced Luffy of over 2 years ago and the beaten, hard-shipped one staring back at Sanji now was overwhelming. And Sanji knew, in that moment, that he had to go through with it. He also knew that Luffy would let him. Zoro grunted a frustrated sigh. Something sharp pierced through Sanji's lungs as his heel came smashing down on Luffy's skull. Sparks flew. Nami screamed. And as silence fell through the clearing, so, finally, did Luffy. Face first, the Straw Hat captain lost consciousness and laid before his chosen cook's lethal feat. "Luffy." Chopper's squiggly eyes flooded. "Why?" Usopp swallowed. "I know he's Sanji, but why didn't you fight back?" "I already said it. He's my friend, yeah, but..." "He's my friend, and he forgot." Luffy leaned back, eyes moving to the source of the memories, strapped down and shaking. "It wasn't me he was hurting." There was a moment of contemplation before Frankie sighed. "All the more reason to knock some sense into him, if you ask me," he muttered. But he trusted Luffy. And, obviously, the guy had brought Sanji back. By the carriage, Germa soldiers looked on in awe. "What amazing strength," one of them said. "I'd expect nothing less of a Vinsmoke," another muttered. Sanji walked away from his ex-captain and his ex-crewmate. Nami stumbled hurriedly off the tree, yelling for Luffy as she ran over to his still form. Sanji didn't dare look back, face masked in a rage he couldn't describe, feelings he couldn't let himself think about it. Nami was at Luffy's side as he bled out, staining the grass. She tried to shake him awake as tears dropped helplessly onto his body. He didn't stir. Nami glanced up. Watched the prince's back as he walked away from them. Walked away from his crew. From his nakama. The Straw Hats watched as, on-screen, something in their navigator snapped. "Hey, Sanji." She pushed herself up and after him. Sanji turned just in time to see the palm of Nami's hand before it made contact with his cheek. A slap heard through all of whole cake. "Well, Nami tried to knock some sense into him at least," Frankie said. "I shouldn't have." "You were upset," Robin assured the navigator. "It's an emotional experience just watching it, let alone living it with no insight into Sanji's reasoning." "Consumed by heartbreak and betrayal is not easy," Brook added. "Don't be so hard on yourself." "Curly wouldn't blame you, either," Zoro muttered, eye closed. He knows what he did. All her emotions stung into his skin, burning. The furious, beautiful brown eyes before him continued to collect Nami's angry tears as she scowled at him. "I'm sorry. Sorry we ever came here." Sanji wouldn't look at her again. Couldn't. Knew he would break. Couldn't risk it. Seeing that Sanji didn't even have the nerve to respond, Nami backed away, returning to her captain and not sparing another look at her ex-cook. This was how she'd remember him, Sanji knew. If she thought about him at all after this. He turned away with a frustrated flourish of his cape. Their ties were meaningless, he heard Judge mutter as he returned to the Cali coach, sick to his stomach. Glad he severed them. "Man, I hate that guy," Frankie muttered. Reiju watched, expressionless. "Thanks for waiting," Sanji mumbled when he climbed back in and took the empty seat, as far from the clearing he could get. "Let's go." The carriage rolled off as Sanji sat. His head immediately fell in his hands, blonde hair curtaining his face. It was over. And if Sanji was suppressing every morsel of feeling he had left, if Sanji could hardly swallow over the lump in his throat, if Sanji's breaths came out labored, well, nobody had to know. Nobody had to see. That was all his problem. The only thing that mattered was that nobody would face his shitty family because of him. Zoro glared, and Nami sighed, wiping at her eyes. "If there is a silver lining to any of this," she said, "it's that Sanji relies on us more now." Robin nodded, many instances presenting themselves during their last adventure in Wano alone. Zoro, however, also thought of what Sanji relied on him to do. If he was ever not his usual self. He supposed, in a way, it did hold some comfort knowing that the cook trusted him with something so personal to his past. He was leaning on Zoro to help him deal with his greatest fear. Chopper sighed. At least the fighting's over. I hate to see it left like that, though. The reindeer instantly froze as, behind the Vinsmoke carriage on-screen, their captain teetered to his feet, a distressed Nami at his side. Luffy struggled, clearly, as that signature determination gleamed even from a distance. He caught his breath, gulping lungfuls of air, before his voice blasted across the clearing. Come back, Sanji. Sanji's pounding heart missed several beats in that moment. His breath caught painfully. Before he could rationalize that he was simply imagining things, his brothers beside him were chortling in amusement at the pirate behind them. That stubborn idiot was still calling out for him, even after all he did? Sanji, all your excuses sounded so fake, Luffy yelled, and Sanji grit his teeth. I don't know why you said that crap, but do you think that's going to make me leave? Like we aren't friends? A couple of dumb lies won't make me give up on my crew? The Straw Hats nodded in unified agreement. Sanji choked. But Luffy was far from finished. What do you take me for? I'm not stupid, I know what's happening, no matter how much you kick me. Sanji bit his lip to keep from screaming out. You're the one who's getting hurt. You're the one feeling the pain. Tears trickled through shaking fingers. It was hopeless, now. Sanji couldn't contain it. A sob stuck in his throat, he choked. His nose ran, and his eyes wept, soaking his crumpled face in a torrent of tears. Nails dug into the sides of his forehead, fingers wrapping through strands of blonde hair, tugging, trying to hide everything, to disappear. He couldn't do this here. No, 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 Usopp was chanting to himself, trying to contain his own weeping as his hands dragged down his face. None of the other Straw Hats were having much luck themselves. There was something about watching their cook, their familiar, present-day cook, trembling in sorrow that none of them were prepared to see. Sanji loved Luffy. Loved the crew. He was actively fighting against love, and that went against everything Sanji was as a person. There was nothing more devastating than that. And it was in that moment that they all realized exactly why Luffy hadn't fought back. Should we stop? Reiju's quiet voice asked. He's still there. Sanji knew she didn't move, but managed to get out a rushed, keep going, without his voice cracking. Silence came from the clearing, and Sanji hoped that meant Luffy was done. He was trying so hard to keep it together, and failing miserably, because the memory suddenly jumped back to a little over 2 years ago. A young Straw Hat pirate watched from a deck above as this curly-browed chef with a crazy kick stuck an enormous plate of food in front of his starving enemy and convinced him with his genuine kindness that living was more important than pride. Luffy had laughed, an instant sort of fondness engrossing him. I think I just found my cook. Scenes of Luffy pestering the annoyed blonde filtered across the screen. The Straw Hats chuckled through their tears at that. How very Luffy. Until, with Zeph batting for Luffy as well, Sanji finally, for 1 second had stopped worrying about everyone else, and reached out at a chance for himself. Oi, I'll join you on this journey of yours to become king of the pirates, he said with a sly smile. By the way, have you ever heard of the All Blue? 2 giant grins stretched out, then, side by side on-screen. Luffy and Sanji, lit up with childlike wonder, sharing their dreams with each other. Gah, why does he have to remember this right now? Frankie cried, streams running down his face. It's too much, it's too much. Usopp had his face pressed against the cyborg's arm as they cried. The others weren't in better shape, except Luffy, who was grinning at the memory. He cherished the moments he met his friends with all his heart. The memory returned to their broken-down Sanji, rattling down a path on Whole Cake Island as his beaten captain that he had disbanded from continued to try to get through to him. It was as if Luffy had had the same memory of his happy cook that Sanji had, because the Straw Hat pirate suddenly grew even more adamant. We're not done yet, he yelled. Our journey isn't over. How do you always know exactly what to say? Nami murmured. She was always impressed by that skill of their usually harebrained captain. Zoro couldn't help sporting a small smirk, pride for his captain, and contented relief that his partner was also part of Luffy's crew. And Sanji silently sobbed. He knew Luffy wasn't talking about his own dream. He was talking about Sanji's. About the all blue. Sanji gripped tighter at his face, hoping his hands would absorb every noise that escaped him, every drop that shed from his remorse and his grief. "I'm staying right here, and I'm not moving an inch," Luffy promised. Sanji didn't understand. "I'm gonna keep waiting for you to come back." "No, I can't, and if you leave me here, I'll just starve to death." Sanji's breath hitched. Chopper gasped at the declaration. Wasn't that a bit much? He wondered, voice muffled in sympathy. Not at all, Robin disagreed gently. Intentional or not, it was the perfect thing to say to get Sanji to realize how serious Luffy was about him. Not only because Sanji had almost starved to death in the past, but also because of the unnaturally excessive way Luffy's body relies on food. The carriage was filled with the Vinsmoke brothers' laughter, but it was distant to Sanji. Drowned out by the cries. By his own cries, and by Luffy's. "Sanji, you're my chef," Luffy bellowed. Sanji was making some of that rat food again. "Royalty doesn't serve anybody, don't ever cook again." To say that in front of his family means more to Sanji than Luffy realized. "Huh?" Brook said. "No one else can take your place. It seems he is simply a waste of life. He intends to make it as if you were never born." Frankie nodded as he wept. "There it is. That's what he needed to hear. Irreplaceable, bro, no matter what your old man says." Voice exuding every ounce of his conviction, Luffy decided loudly, "I'm not eating another bite of anything, unless you cook it." Sanji was shaking. Nami was shaking. "Even if I go hungry," Luffy continued, fists clenched and face focused. "Even if spears or swords or stones rain down on me, I'll keep waiting for you. So, you better come back, you hear me? No matter what." "Luffy." Chopper whimpered again. Like the others, he didn't know if he wanted to laugh or cry or cheer or wail in despair or. "I need you on my crew, Sanji," Luffy's eyes blazed. Without you. A montage of memories spun before Sanji's heartache. Luffy pestering him to join his crew. Him, Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Usopp sailing down the Red Line on the Going Merry. The four-scene Straw Hats smiled, bittersweet, at the memory. Chasing Chopper until he joined them. Chopper laughed, rubbing the snot from his weeping nose. The X's on their arms as they bid Vivi farewell. The array of heart eyes as Robin joined the crew. Robin chuckled fondly. Launching into Skypia. Complaining about the loud pirates in the Bharati before spotting Nami with them and instantly appearing on his knee at her feet with a rose in hand. Nami grinned, wiping at her eyes with a laugh. Always was a lovesick idiot, wasn't he? Marching up to Arlong Park, his first stint as a Straw Hat. Bidding a heartfelt farewell to Mary. Usopp's eyes watered more at the proof Mary meant a lot to Sanji, too. The 6 Straw Hats at Eni's lobby, standing strong for Robin. It's amazing, Robin thought. Even being Sanji's memories, her own were so entangled in his. They had all shared so much together, Frankie debuting the Thousand Sunny. Hell yeah, Frankie grinned. The eerie introduction of Brook. Yo-ho-ho. I sure know how to make an entrance. Sanji saving Nami from her forced marriage. We'll call it even, Sanji-kun. Nami saluted, as Luffy laughed at the comparison. Him standing up to Kuma, trying to protect Zoro. Wait, what happened there? Luffy questioned. Before he could finish, Zoro was already answering, a hint of a secret smile on his face. Nothing happened. Him and Zoro teaming up against Foxy. Zoro did laugh out loud at that. The Prince Cook suckered into being the ball. He was fond of that time, though, as it was the first time they actively worked together and found they were pretty good at it. When they wanted to be, Zoro thought with a lopsided smirk. The memories sped, faster and faster. Everyone reuniting at Saboti Archipelago. Everyday shenanigans aboard the Sunny. A collection of the endless times the Straw Hat Pirates were all together, drinking, eating, laughing. And then, suddenly, right back to the beginning of it all, at the edge of the Bharati. I promised myself that one of these days, I go to the Grand Line. Let's go right now. Sanji pulled the onslaught of memories from his brain as he tugged harshly at his hair, folding in on himself, silent as he broke. He couldn't bear this anymore. Luffy's declaration that he needed Sanji on his crew nearly broke the prince's heart into two. He was desperate to keep the pieces together, but Luffy. Without you, Sanji. The cook's fingers dug deeper into his skull. Without you, I'll never be king of the pirates. The Straw Hats, as one, smiled, eyes shining behind teary gazes. Genuinely happy their cook got to hear just how much he meant to their captain. And just like that, Sanji's heart shattered. There was too much to process in Sanji's heart. Even as his memory whirled farther along on his trek to Whole Cake Chateau, his thoughts never calmed. He had been trying exceptionally hard to convince himself that he was making the right choices here, and Luffy had to go and throw a wrench in his resolve with a few choice words. It was just like him. Luffy's eyes scrunched closed as his grin grew too big for his face, regretting absolutely nothing. Sanji hadn't expected he was worthy enough to be something the future king of the pirates would reach out for. He knows now, though, Chopper quipped happily, eyes still watery from the previous memory. It was such a harsh reunion, but in a way maybe it was the catalyst to get Sanji to hear what he needed to from Luffy, and that eased the little doctor's distress a bit. But no matter what Luffy promised, Sanji thought, surely, he wouldn't wait for him. He had to know a lost cause when he saw one. Kaya. Chopper screeched, all previous thoughts vanishing. You mean he doesn't even believe it? After all that? Frankie all but shouted in dismay, and he said Luffy had a thick skull. Maybe, Robin said, or he might just need time to process it. Zoro had to agree. A lot happened there. Curly's mind's in overdrive. How long did you go without eating, exactly? Usopp asked their captain, diverting from the sadness that was Sanji. Did you really not eat anything that Sanji didn't cook? Luffy nodded proudly. Yep. Not a single thing. He even turned onto his stomach so the syrup rain wouldn't get in his mouth, Nami mentioned with a frown. That's dedication, several Straw Hats said together as a bead of sweat dropped down the back of Usopp's head. I don't think enough of us are concerned about the concept of syrup rain, the sniper muttered. While the Vinsmoke family traveled on, thankfully in silence as Sanji tried to collect himself, the clear sky clouded into a swift darkness, pink lightning electrifying the air. The Straw Hats knew that was Big Mom's doing, however, the rumbling approaching the carriage wasn't thunder. It was footsteps. Appearing in the thousands, Big Mom's pirates, soldiers and generals alike, all different shapes, sizes, and species, were marching down the road in the opposite direction as the Vinsmokes. They paid Germa 66 no mind as they maneuvered around them without so much as a glance. That's like, the entirety of Big Mom's fleet right there, Usopp yelped. A whole army? Yanji exclaimed excitedly as Sanji wiped at his wet, burning eyes to look out among the vast crowd hoarding the street. They're hunting down Straw Hat, no doubt, Niji said, glancing at Sanji. The rat's as good as dead now. Frankie whistled. Big Mom doesn't play around. Wah? She sent all of them just for Luffy? Chopper's eyes popped out of his head. Usopp glanced at him. Hey, why are you surprised? Where were you during all this anyway? In the mirror world with Carrot, the reindeer answered seriously, brows furrowed. Mirror world? The hell was wrong with this place? Usopp was so glad he went on ahead to Wano. Wow, that's funny, Yanji added toward his blonde brother. He won't run because he's waiting for his old pal Sanji. Good thing you said your goodbyes. Please tell me you didn't try to fight all of them, Usopp said, but the look Luffy gave him wasn't promising. Fear raked through Sanji as his brothers named off all the famed warriors they noticed with large bounties. Big Mom's children, all powerful in their own rights. Who am I kidding? Yanji was still saying. Even Straw Hat wouldn't be stupid enough to sit around after getting a load of that army. Ha ha ha. Ha ha, joke's on you. I am stupid enough. Nami groaned. I don't want to remember that, either. That was terrifying. Sanji knew Luffy. Knew that stubborn bastard wouldn't stray even if faced with this magnitude of opponents. But there was no way even Luffy could hope to defeat an emperor's entire army by himself. The Straw Hat captain was incredible and could defy great odds, but he wasn't invincible. What is he talking about? We did pretty good, right, Nami? We were captured, you rubber moron. And Nami was with him. He would protect her, right? The cook had to calm himself. Of course he would. Even if it went to shit, Luffy would protect his friends. He didn't have to worry about them. He didn't have to worry. He didn't. Oh. Brook nodded. He's worrying. Lightning flashed like an ill omen, and the rain began to pour. Usopp narrowed his eyes. Syrup rain. Before long, the Vinsmokes had arrived at their destination, Whole Cake Chateau. The home of Emperor Big Mom. The memory shifted to what appeared to be her dining hall, the room just as pink and edible as everything else in Big Mom's godforsaken territory. Big Mom herself arrived in the giant hall as the Vinsmokes, save for Sanji, stood at her arrival. Sorry to keep you waiting, Germa 66. I had a little hiccup to take care of. Everything should be peachy now. As Big Mom took her seat, she glanced down at Sanji, eyeing the golden cuffs on his wrist with a smirk. Judge said before that only Big Mom had the keys to those, Robin noted. I assume that means the cuffs were her idea entirely, probably a common precaution among her notoriety of arranged marriages. You must be the infamous Black Leg Sanji, she said. I do hope you're excited to become the husband of my dear pudding. Sanji only scowled, breaking eye contact. Look at that, Big Mom crooned. He's shy, how cute. Something about the exchange made Zoro sick. That was when Pudding herself arrived, doe-eyed and lovely as ever. She was Sanji's fiancé, Frankie, Usopp, and Zoro shouted together. Zoro sputtered. Why couldn't she have looked more like Big Mom or something? Wow, she's quite lovely, Robin commented, earning an irritated huff from the swordsman. Lovely, but devious, said Brook, as Luffy and Nami glowered at the screen. That was when Pudding was still tricking them. Robin didn't seem surprised by the skeleton's remark. Well, she is a pirate emperor's daughter. It would be unwise to trust her. Among the sudden silence, there were very specific pursed lips and avoided eye contact. Oh dear, Robin sighed, a fond shake of her head. It was Luffy's fault, Nami and Chopper shrieked. Huh? When we first met her we didn't know she was the one marrying Sanji. She was just excited we liked her chocolate. Haha. Remember how good it was, Chopper? We ate, like, a whole building. The reindeer's eyes lit up. Actually, yeah, we're not doing this, Nami growled. Frankie and Robin were looking over at Brook, however. You too, huh, bro? Frankie questioned. Brook hummed. She was quite the actress, and I was hoping to see her panties. Nami was livid in her embarrassment. I can't with any of you. It wasn't a comfortable engagement lunch. Not by a long shot. Pudding seemed to be constantly eyeing her fiancé rather shyly, while Sanji stared despondently down at his food, never even noticing. Which was strange to see, as the crew was used to Sanji's usual demeanor around pretty women. No matter where his mind wandered, it kept landing back on Luffy and his crew. He didn't know how his friends made it through Big Mom's security network. Didn't know how they managed to intercept Germa 66 on their way to the chateau. What he did know was that they were a resourceful bunch, that was for sure. Stubborn, too. But as Sanji ate, the clinking of his gold shackles reminded him why it was too late now. The Straw Hats sighed. Seriously, how did you ever get through to him? Usopp muttered. Luffy meant well. He always did. That was the type of guy he was. And maybe he did mean what he said. Maybe he did see something in Sanji that was worth bringing him back. It did little to negate the fact that Luffy didn't have all the information, though. There was too much at play here. Too much at risk. Ya know, Big Mom said, interrupting Sanji's inner too much about Sanji already. What a coincidence that he's a chef. Why, he's the perfect match for my pudding. Zoro scowled further, remembering Luffy's remark about her making chocolate. A baker? Fucking perfect. They had every advantage in the book to wrap Sanji around their fingers. Well, they're getting married either way. This is strictly a political arrangement. Big Mom laughed. But it's lovely that we can find something that works to our mutual benefit, Judge. Indeed, the King of Germa agreed. Though it would make me even happier if our children could share in the joy. What a lying liar, Chopper groused. Even Big Mom with her real plan. Why did people have to be so shady? Judge raised his glass. Let's give them the perfect wedding. A toast to their future, Big Mom declared. Everyone drank, and the memory transitioned. Sanji was suddenly in his guest room, pacing. His mind wouldn't shut off. Predictable, Zoro inwardly griped. The marriage was a rose among the thorns compared to everything else involved. Even if Sanji still didn't plan to go through with it, even if he was still rummaging for a way to prevent the arrangement, There was no going back to his friends after what he put them through earlier. Luffy had to know that. Nami would tell him as much. Knock some sense into that crazy captain. Like Luffy ever listens to me, Nami grumbled. And if he couldn't go back to them, he couldn't rely on them, either. Luffy frowned. Sanji had dug his own grave and built a wall up to prevent anyone from finding it. He had no help here. The fact that it was his own fault being put aside, how could he ever hope to get out of this? The answer was clear. He couldn't. He wasn't strong enough on his own here. He had an emperor to deal with, and his father. That wasn't even counting their subordinates or the threats they had hanging over him. And now Big Mom's army was actively after his friends. Sanji paused by the tall window overlooking the hills, watching the sweet rain pour. He thought back to Nami's and Luffy's final words to him. The looks on their faces. He picked up his lighter from the windowsill and lit a cigarette. He thought of the army that went after them and tried to see beyond the glass pane to where their battle should have taken place, but it was too dark and stormy to see clearly. He knew it couldn't have just been the two of them who had entered enemy territory. Luffy had said Zoro took a team to Wano already, so they were probably split pretty evenly. Although, it meant the Moss Head wasn't there, which was probably for the best. It was hard enough that the last visions he had of Luffy and Nami were during that awful fight. He didn't need Zoro's stare, wishing a brutal death upon him, to haunt him as well. The cook's thoughts had Zoro narrowing his eye. He wouldn't have wished that. One knock to the head would have sufficed. In any case, wherever the crew was out there, Big Mom knew where they were. She already had a vendetta against Luffy since Fishman Island. She would have them chased down to the end of the line even if they did escape the clearing, and Sanji knew that. Maybe there was a way he could protect them, too, with all this. Protect them further. If they could leave peacefully somehow. Sanji, you've done so much already, Chopper whined as a vein in Zoro's forehead throbbed. Seriously, what more does he have to offer? Usopp said. Complete and utter cooperation, Robin supplied, making everyone groan, including his soul. Usopp lowered his head. It was rhetorical, Robin. Sanji was already neck-deep in this crap. What more did he have to lose? It only made sense to go all in, for them. Luffy, everyone, please stay safe. That's probably when we were captured, Luffy laughed. I hate you, Nami said, face stoic. So much. Luffy only cackled harder. Don't worry, Jinbei found us. I was more upset they made me leave the clearing after I promised Sanji I wouldn't move. He glowered now. They're lucky I didn't miss him. Zoro cocked his head at Luffy's words. Did that mean the hard-headed love cook went back? The memory jumped, then. It was the same room, but some time had passed. Sanji was curled up on the windowsill now, head in his hands, cigarette hanging from his frown. Being alone in that room for hours on end was doing little for his mental state. Everyone please, get out of here while you can. He would handle everything else, he had to. In fact, he already accepted it, hadn't he? That was why he had said what he did to Pudding. With a swirl of colors, Sanji recalled a couple hours prior to his current situation, right after lunch had ended, when he had secretly met with his fiancée. Something inside Zoro was warning him he wasn't going to like this. But he didn't like any of it, so who the hell cared at this point? The swordsman swallowed. Right? Someone tell me it doesn't get worse. It was 2 o'clock that same afternoon, and Sanji was seated in Pudding's room. You lead my friends to this island? Pudding bowed her head, caramel bangs falling to her frown. I'm sorry. Her voice was soft-spoken and sweet. I gave Luffy my word that I would bring you to the southwest coast so you would be able to get away from Mama safely. Luffy, Nami, Brook, and Chopper glowered at the screen. They couldn't believe they had fallen for that. But I couldn't make it happen, and now they're all in grave danger. Hold up. She was trying to help you guys, Frankie questioned. 4 insulted pouts formed across the cells. No, she was not. Then Chopper straightened, tilting his head. Well, actually at the end she kinda did. She's a no-good liar, Luffy fumed, simply remembering her confession to him and Nami in the library that had angered him. She set us up, Nami explained. And you fell for it. Tisk. Usopp shook his head in shame. One day Nami was going to manifest Luffy's stretching abilities merely out of spite so she could smack her idiot crewmates upside their idiot heads no matter how far they were from her. I see now, Sanji said. I wondered how they managed to pass through all that security to get here. It was thanks to you, he sighed. I know you meant well. That said, I still wouldn't have gone to the coast. Pudding gasped dramatically. If you're worried about the invitation, you can let me take the blame. She's my mom. I'll be fine. Just don't show up at the ceremony. She's used to arranged marriages, so she puts special bracelets on people who seem like they might run away. If you try to leave the island with one. I know, it explodes. Sanji showed Pudding that he already had some on him. She gasped again, covering her mouth with her hands. Interesting that she would bring up something that was quite obviously on his person already, Robin commented. She couldn't have missed them, Zoro agreed. Chopper gasped. She's feeding him information he already knows in an attempt to be seen as trying to help. A classic manipulation tactic, Usopp nodded, rubbing his chin wisely. So, she's already gotten to you, Pudding said through her fingers, eyes watering. She is good, Robin noted offhandedly. The archaeologist had been through quite a few infiltration missions in her time, and she had to admit that Big Mom's daughter had her act down perfectly. There were hardly any micro-expressions that slipped past her facade, and the sincerity in her tone was calm and steady. Even Robin would have found it hard to spot had she not known ahead of time to look for it. Sanji's eyes went to the floor as he sighed. Sadly, yeah, she's thinking ahead. And even if that weren't the case, no one here has my back. He's resolved to the fact that he can't handle it alone, Brooke said, and yet. He won't ask for help, frowned Chopper. More like, he doesn't think he's worth helping, Usopp said, making Chopper's eyes squiggle in distress. The little reindeer had to keep reminding himself that Sanji did let them help him, eventually. Admitting it out loud made it real to Sanji somehow. The wayward chef suddenly felt more alone than he had before. But after hearing it was Pudding who had helped his crew try to get to him, and seeing how understanding she'd been through this whole process with him, it was making him wonder. Yeah, Sanji was alone. Not a single person he could trust. Not a single person who cared about him. Except maybe this sweet, beautiful girl before him if he could give her the chance. There was no question to whether or not she could protect Zeph or defend Sanji from his family. However, that didn't mean she'd never care about him. A sliver of light in the darkness, perhaps. After all, she was helping him and his friends this much already, even going against her own mother. Sanji could try to trust her, couldn't he? Oh no, he's falling right into that devil woman's trap, Chopper squeaked. Can't really blame him, Frankie said, still unable to see the devil part in this woman they keep talking about. Bro thinks he has nothing. What about Reiju? Chopper idly wondered. Robin shook her head. Reiju cares about him, but she is in no position to help. Plus, he hasn't seen her in years. For all he knows, she's less likely to help now than she was back then. She more or less already told him it was his fault for coming back, Nami said. Which was fair on her part. Trusting Pudding was worth the risk, wasn't it? What else did Sanji have to lose? Resolved, Sanji reached up and carefully peeled the healing mask from his face. Pudding's eyes widened as, suddenly, the man's face grew plump and swollen. So swollen, that he couldn't speak without slurring his words. Even though we're brothers, Sanji told her, they still did this. The concern and shock were evident on Pudding's face. Your own family beat you that badly? Honestly, the shock probably wasn't an act, Usopp mumbled. That's right. But why? Sanji stood. Pink lightning flashed behind them, silhouetting the window and casting them in a purple glow. Because to them, Sanji said, I'm just a failure who shouldn't be allowed to live. Zoro fidgeted, agitated. The cook shouldn't be telling her this. These were personal to him, and if what the others were saying was true then, Zoro's fists clenched. I've never once been happy about being born as royalty. Sanji glanced out the window, out at the dark, glittering ocean with longing. That's the reason I went out to sea. Searching for a place I wasn't even sure was real. And now, if I try to prevent this arranged marriage, his fist came up and slammed lightly onto the glass of his new prison. They'll slaughter all my friends and me. On top of that, they're going to kill the man in the East Blue who saved my life. The man who I respect as my real father. Images of the memories of Zeph ran through the Straw Hats' minds. Sanji's fears were deeply rooted. There was no easy way to tug them loose. Zeph meant everything to Sanji, for good reason. And being able to cook was correlated, not only to his passion, but regarding his mother, and then later to his adopted father figure. Every one of Sanji's fears were locked onto being poked and prodded until he snapped. On top of that, his fears weren't the only things being manipulated, his kindness was, too. Zoro cursed every single person on this godforsaken world who had turned the cook's best qualities against him. Sanji lowered his arm and turned slowly toward the quiet girl intently watching him. No matter what I do at this point, there's no way out. Which is why, I've decided that I won't fight this anymore. I'm willing to accept this marriage on one condition. I want Big Mom to let my friends go unharmed. Nami frowned. Even if they agreed to that, how could Sanji believe them? By having no other option, Brook assumed. Your soldiers are out there attacking as we speak. Pudding gasped, covering her face with her hands again. I'm so sorry. You're in such pain, and it's all because of what I did. How does she figure that? Frankie questioned, confused. She doesn't, Zoro stated quietly. Deadly. I don't know what intel they had on the cook prior to his arrival there, but that woman's observed him enough by this point to know what buttons to push. Nami glowered, annoyed now. Zoro's right. She knows exactly how Sanji would react to that. Besides, Nami'd played with the emotions of plenty of men during their travels, whether it was to buy her drinks, lower their prices, or to pickpocket them. She knew the signs. And men like Sanji, almost too easy. It just pissed her off that it was happening to her crewmate. Her crewmate who had been through hell, and was risking more than berries. Just as Pudding had intended, her sudden crying stunned Sanji. Suddenly, he wasn't thinking about himself anymore. He was thinking about how she could possibly blame herself. She turned herself into the martyr to deflect from the actual martyr. Roll'd never forgive himself if he made a girl cry, Chopper grumbled with a small whine. Pudding, Sanji ran over to her, palms raised to placate her. Someone so beautiful shouldn't be crying, especially because of him. It's not your fault, I promise. But, she sniffled. Sanji shook his head adamantly, feeling the urge to explain, so she understood it wasn't her at all. 13 years ago, I managed to escape hell, only to walk right back in again. And I should try to be happy. After all, I was free for all of these years, right? You deserve to be free, always, Luffy commented. The friends who helped me improve as a chef, and the companions who joined me in my travels. I'm grateful to all the people I met out there. And I can't bear to hurt them. That's why, my adventure ends here. Sorrow surrounded the Straw Hats. What a terrible thought to have. A tear slipped down Pudding's cheek, and Sanji was taken aback. Hey, don't cry, it'll make me feel worse. Now she's just going to cry more because he said that, Nami groused. Pudding started sobbing, the Straw Hats scowled. Look, Sanji soothed. It's okay. I'm sorry, I can't help it. But listen, Sanji, I promise. Pudding rubbed her eyes and moved closer, staring up at him with doe-like eyes, long lashes, and rosy cheeks. If you decide to marry me, I won't let it be hell. Using his own words against him, Brook muttered. Zoro burned inside. Seething. Not only was she stringing the cook along, but the bait on the line was hope. The thing that idiot was clinging to most. A light in the darkness she only planned to snuff out when his back was turned. Once again, Sanji was taken aback. He didn't think anybody would be on his side, didn't think anybody would care. He took a chance telling Pudding his plan since she'd been so understanding since the beginning, but now, maybe she was a blessing in this nightmare. Zoro closed his eye. Time for those breathing tactics again. Even if he'd have to have time to adapt, to accept, to mourn, and to adjust. Wouldn't that be best? Giving this girl a chance? The Straw Hats, frustrated as they were, couldn't blame Sanji for his thinking. If they hadn't had faith that their captain would bring him back, knowing that Sanji was completely worth the trouble, then, yeah, they'd want Sanji to give even the slightest chance at happiness a try. He deserved to be happy. But that wasn't what was in store for him here, and it hurt a little that he had been through so much in his life only to be continuously taken for granted. Seeming taken aback herself, Pudding blushed, stepping back. Oh dear, what am I saying? You're suffering so much and I'm making everything about me. No, you're exploiting his kindness on purpose, Chopper objected. You don't want to marry me, Pudding cried. So of course this would be hell for you. Why am I being so insensitive at a time like this? It's awful. I'm so embarrassed. Usopp grumbled. Asks why she's making it about herself and then continues to make it about herself. After all, you and I have only just met. So how could I possibly hope to fill the hole in your heart? Besides all that, you still might change your mind. So I was being presumptuous, too. She's a natural at playing the victim, Brooke applauded. Not good for us, of course. Sanji had no chance, Usopp agreed, and Zoro grimaced harder than ever before. The edges in Sanji's eyes softened, and his resolve fortified further. Listening to Pudding hope to care for him, and then blaming herself for his own struggles, was hard to hear. And it was in that moment that his decision solidified. Luffy and the crew would go on without him, and they'd be alright. Sanji, right now, had to make do with what he had in front of him. Sanji walked over to Pudding and pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. She didn't resist. Looked up at him with an innocent twinkle in her gaze. Sanji wanted her to know that if she so desperately and kindly wanted to be there for him, then he would be there for her, 100%. Pudding, you're my salvation. What are you saying? If you'll have me, I want us to get married tomorrow. He did propose to her, Nami whispered, and in such a heartfelt, vulnerable way. Usopp had his head down, swinging it from side to side. It hurts to watch. He truly is a romantic, Brooke said. He tilted his bony head, sockets eyeing a very silent swordsman. Robin followed his line of sight, then frowned. You've been awfully quiet, Zoro. Several sympathetic eyes moved to the green-haired Straw Hat, and the man in question refused to look at anybody. Whatever they saw on his face, he didn't care. Didn't need pity, even knowing there was no hiding the fact he didn't want to see this. Didn't want to watch the cook, his cook, propose marriage to someone else. And having Sanji believing it was the only way for him somehow made it even worse. Basically coerced into a broken heart. Sure, there were times in the past Zoro had pictured Sanji with someone else. Sanji looking at them in a way Zoro wanted to be looked at. Touching them in a way Zoro wanted to be touched. Or being touched by them in a way only Zoro wanted to do the touching. It made him ridiculously sick on multiple occasions, though he'd never admit it. For years he was haunted by images of pretty women hoarding the pretty chef. And when Zoro realized the cook could be just as attracted to handsome men, it had been a game changer to the same degree that it hadn't. Now, there were twice as many threats to the cook's heart that Zoro had to accept might win. Might steal that curly-browed idiot away. Had it happened, this was what it would have been like. It was easier for Zoro to watch the love-sick dumbass twirling around beautiful people when he was never serious about any of it. When the swordsman knew, logically, it was all surface level and lighthearted. This situation was too real. This Sanji was somber. Serious. Openly allowing the depths of his passionate heart out for this woman. Giving himself up to her. All of him, because the cook wasn't the type to do anything half-ass. And that would have been hard enough for Zoro to witness without the knowledge that she was deceiving him. He was pouring himself out to her for what? Zoro, Chopper prodded when he took too long to respond. Fine, nobody believed him. A love-struck pink glow electrified the air as Sanji and Pudding embraced tighter, before the memory shifted back to Sanji pacing back in his guest room. His thoughts were still avidly unfocused even after his resolve with Pudding. It was like the closer the wedding came, the more and more anxious he got. It's fine, damn it. Luffy and the others won't be hurt. Big Mom promised me that. He must have brought up his condition to Big Mom personally at some point, Robin observed. If I get married, the Bharati will be fine, too. His smoking increased in speed, stress overtaking him. Puff after puff, for once, none of it seemed to help. Of course, I don't want to leave my friends, but at least no one will die. That's all that matters. Why can't I be grateful? Because you might be admitting what you don't want, but you're not admitting what you do, Chopper said. Luffy nodded. He can't mourn something he won't acknowledge exists, Robin agreed sadly. Subconsciously, he might not be as ready to give us up. Frustrated with himself, Sanji glanced at his reflection in the window. The man he saw wasn't a prince nor a pirate. He was someone stuck in between, faltering. If he couldn't shroud his grief for his own sake, he knew someone he could do it for. Pudding is all that I've got, he told himself. He'd never be able to have his friends again, or anyone on his side. He'd never be able to love. A quick flash of green hair and steel blades shot through his thoughts that he quickly extinguished. Zoro had been thought of, and yet, he didn't know if that made it better or worse. "No, I can't make her sad," Sanji said. "Deed herself he'd be okay." His glass reflection mimicked him with the same masked uncertainty. "I'll put on a smile, for her. Who could hurt a sweet girl like that? After all, I'd have to be some kind of monster." Sanji clenched his fists, picturing himself a Vinsmoke, the ultimate monster. He'd tried to be that to Luffy, and it had backfired spectacularly. He wasn't about to try it again, especially not with his fiancée. After a moment more of contemplation, Sanji's held breath ignited. "I'll make you happy, Pudding," he trilled, shooting his arms up into the air and shouting toward the ceiling with hearts in his eyes. "Don't you worry, just regular Sanji. You know me, the romantic chef, right?" The Straw Hats furrowed their brows, as it was painful to watch Sanji force himself so much. "Pudding, I won't let you down." He twirled around the room. "I'll shower you with love, my sweet bride, just you wait." Sanji spun to the door and then out of it with a newfound purpose. "So, he still doesn't know Pudding's tricking him," Luffy said. "Wonder when he figures it out." "Does he?" Usopp asked. "I mean, without you guys to tell him, or something." "Pudding met with this while we were held captive," Nami explained. "She told us he proposed to her, but she also said they still weren't getting married because her brown irises ignited like dark flames. She was going to betray him. But Luffy said Sanji knew by the time he got close enough to warn him. So between now and the next few hours of Sanji's memories, something changes," Nami finished. "Wonder what's gonna tip him off," Frankie said. "He knew it couldn't be good." They all knew it couldn't be good. Pink roses spilled from Sanji's arms when he returned to his guest bedroom. He clipped and arranged them into a perfect fan of petals before tying them together at the stems with a perfect bow. Ever the romantic. A short, purple guard resembling an eggplant stumbled into the room, his stout arms full of bags. Sanji's face lit up. "Thank you so much," the cook said. "Ah, he must be planning a romantic meal for his dear fiancée," Brook said before being pierced silent by the steel of Zoro's gaze. "It is indeed a waste," he placated hurriedly. "I do have some news," the eggplant guard said. "We're holding Straw Hat and the cat burglar captive in the library." Sanji's smile faltered. They caught Luffy and Nami? The anxiety-riddled chef carefully placed the flowers back on the table, hands tense. "No, don't stress out. They don't want them interfering with the wedding, so I'm sure they'll set them free as soon as it's over. Big Mom gave me her word, after all." "I wouldn't cling too hard onto the word of Big Mom," Usopp mumbled. The plump guard was oblivious to Sanji's turmoil as he continued. "And some of your other friends are causing trouble in the chateau. They say Soul King and Jaguar Mink are going on a rampage." "Yo-ho, I do love a good rampage. However, our beloved Pedro." "Pedro," Chopper also whispered solemnly. The Straw Hats saddened at the mention of their mink ally and friend. They all knew of his heroic sacrifice, and it hurt every time. Sanji's eyes widened further at the onslaught of news. "Brook? Sweet General Smoothie and General Baritone are apparently guarding the area. Although the intruders have eluded them thus far, it's only a matter of time before they—" Sanji quickly interrupted. "That's enough." Brook chuckled. "We eluded them the entire time, actually." Nami side-eyed the skeletal musician, unimpressed. "Didn't we find you in bed with Big Mom?" Everyone sputtered and Brook swiveled frantically between his crewmates. "That is not how she means it. That is not how she means it." His voice dropped several octaves. "Nami, how could you say such a thing in such a way?" "He was only sleeping with her," Chopper clarified innocently. If Brook didn't have sea prism stone cuffs on, his soul would have poured from his mouth in humiliation. Frankie snickered. "You've been holding out on us, bro. Is that how you managed to get the road poneglyph tracing?" "Robin," Brook gasped. "You too? Have you no shame?" "Can we focus here?" Zoro grumbled. "Brook can tell us all about his poor life choices another time." Brook's head drooped as Luffy and Usopp giggled at him. Sanji held out his hands, desperate for a distraction. "Can I have my groceries?" "Right here, sir. Can I use this kitchen?" Eggplant guard nodded. "Uh-huh." "Pudding didn't show up for dinner tonight," Sanji told him offhandedly. "I should cook her something in case she's hungry." As he said it, he pulled a tangerine from the bag and paused, the look in his eyes changing. "She's got me really worried," he said. staring at the orange fruit like it held a hidden message nobody else could see. I think, who he's really worried about, is Nami, Robin surmised fondly. It was natural that Sanji might show his true feelings through subconscious measures. Nami's eyes softened. "Oh, Sanji, yeah, I heard she's not feeling well," the guard said. "It's a real shame, sir." Well, Sanji was going to fix that. Preparing the food was Sanji's top priority. He couldn't allow himself to think about anything else as it would only distract him, throw him off. He needed to focus on only what he knew, and what he knew was that pudding was all he had left. She was his last hope. He couldn't mess this up. When had the crew heard that from him before? Always, it seemed. Like a toxic mantra. When finished preparing the food and meticulously sorting the bento into a picnic basket, however, Sanji paused once again. Did a double take. Shoot. I got carried away and made way too much. The portions he was looking at could feed an entire crew. I don't think Pudding's appetite is this big. What was I thinking? The crew couldn't help but smile a little knowing he was thinking about them out of habit. And Sanji was usually not so distracted in the kitchen. A clear testament to how anxious he was really feeling. Adding wine, chocolate, and tangerines to the picnic basket, Sanji shrugged. Oh well, if she can't finish it, then I can help. He then imagined her delighted reaction to the meal. Her complimenting his cooking while he preened, framed by pink petals. He looked so cute to her that she grew hard eyes and began to feed him. Luffy laughed as Zoro rolled his eye. What a moron. Robin tilted her head with a small smile. I feel less intrusive knowing our cook often wears his fantasies on his face quite well. Brook hummed. Sanji desires to be fed by a delicate hand, Zoro? The swordsman's heart skipped in his chest. Would you knock it off already? I've never fed the cook. Didn't know you would, like that. Zoro's thoughts abruptly faltered as Brook suddenly appeared at the edge of his cell, sockets and permanent smile peeking straight at him through the electrified bars. Is that so? The skeleton crooned. Oi, why don't you just worry about your relationship with Big Mom, you bonehead? Luffy cackled harder, and Nami waved innocently when Brook glared at her rather than Zoro. But then the skeleton simply shrugged. Ah well, unlike certain members of our crew, I am blessed with thick skin. Which is ironic considering I don't have any skin, yo-ho-ho-ho. In an excited hurry now that his fantasies were reignited, Sanji grabbed the basket of food and the flowers and danced from the room, singing, Pudding, I'm on my way. The eggplant guard was sleeping by his door now, and he stirred awake. Taking off, Sanji, sir, I'm gonna enjoy the one and only beam of light that's left in my life. Sanji's words grounded the Straw Hats from their light-hearted bickering. They were a mix of sighs and grimaces now. It wasn't boding well that their cook was betting everything he had left in him on someone they knew was planning to betray him. Sanji made his way toward Pudding's quarters, a gentle smile on his face. Getting caught up in his dumb-ass fantasies again, Zoro figured. When Sanji got to Pudding's door, the door itself glared down at him. And just what do you want, lover boy? It asked. State your business here. Why is everything alive there? Usopp all but squawked. It wasn't normal. Were they like the toys in Dressrosa? No, actually, he didn't want to think about it. Sanji gave the door a big, toothy smile. I'd like to see Pudding. Permission denied. His smile faded out. Please, you let me in earlier. No means no, lover boy. Pack it up, why not? Because Lady Pudding would like her privacy, go away. What could she be doing? Of course, as he thought about it, a blush painted his cheeks. Several Straw Hats rolled their eyes this time, classic cook. Sanji shook his head to clear it, and then bowed, holding up his gifts. Give this to her please. What is that, lover boy? Sanji smiled again. Flowers, and some food I made for her. You prepared that, how charming. Sanji lit up at the praise. Zoro couldn't control the warmth his stomach emanated at the sight of the cook smiling like that. Didn't help that the swordsman now knew it was the same smile only the cook's mother could pull out of him during his childhood. Damn curly brows. And damn that woman he was smiling for, because she sure as hell didn't deserve that face. She looked a little unwell earlier, Sanji continued. So I figured a little food in her stomach would help her feel better. It's still a no, lover boy. Sanji glowered at the sentient door. Oh, come on. Is that all you can say? He pouted. Please just give this to her. Don't make me slam in your face. Hit the road. Luffy quirked an eyebrow and scowled. Man, that door sucks. With an irritated scowl, Ked away. Once out of sight, he leaned against the wall for a smoke, wondering why such a simple request was proving this difficult. Because nothing is ever easy for you, Sanji, Usopp stated, matter of fact. Hell, I'd smoke all the time, too, if I had his knack for trouble, Frankie said. Chopper stubbornly frowned. No, he needs proper stress relief. Wait a minute, the cook thought suddenly. I think there's a balcony outside her room. He could easily sneak her gifts, problem solved. Outside, the balcony was blanketed in flower beds, just as beautiful as the other gardens Sanji had seen around the grounds. However, it was still drenched and pouring and smelled sickly sweet from all the rain. He glanced cautiously down at the picnic basket. The wicker definitely not waterproof. But as he remembered his proposal to the girl he swore to make happy, he knew he had to do this, weather be damned. It would be quick and simple and perfect. She'd be fed and comforted, and that was all Sanji wanted. The cook strode out, smiling with a faint blush at having someone to dote on again. Someone he could take care of and love, and, this time, who could possibly love him in return. All he ever did was yearn and long for and chase dreams that were always just out of his reach. But to finally, be able to have that missing piece he'd always wanted? He'd never thought he'd be granted something so precious. And if the nightmare he was in was the reason for this random act of luck, then he'd just have to accept that. So much confliction poured from the listening Straw Hats as they took in every one of Sanji's thoughts in a way only people who truly loved him could. Absolutely, and without judgment. Yeah, they wanted to scream at him to stop putting his whole heart into everything he did because that risked complete destruction if it backfired, but they also didn't want him to change. Knew that exact passion was what made Sanji. Well, Sanji. His thoughts and desires were so deep and so pure and, even believing he wasn't deserving of any of it, he still dared to hope that the next time would be different. And it was absolutely crushing to know that this time would not be different, no matter how much effort or trust he put into it. Charlotte Pudding was Sanji's angel in the darkness. The last of any hope he had. She was as forced into this as he was, and she had accepted him. All of him. Even knowing what his brothers had done to him, even knowing what his family thought of him, even knowing he couldn't offer her much. Twirls, you're offering her you. Zoro couldn't understand how that was considered not much to the swordsman. It was everything, and Sanji was serving her himself on a silver fucking platter. Sanji had trusted her with things he hadn't anybody else. Ever. Not his crew. Not even Zeph. When it was all said and done, Pudding still hadn't seen a pathetic failure of a man. She saw someone she believed she could love, and Sanji was going to make damn sure he lived up to that. The Straw Hats were sickly silent, thoughts spiraling out of control. Much like this situation they knew was headed for heart-wrenching disaster. What part of Sanji's life wasn't a heart-wrenching disaster? They were so tired of it. They couldn't even imagine how their chef was still standing. And now he was setting this traitorous witch up for the ultimate final blow. A feeling of foreboding gnawed at Zoro's gut. Even his swords shook. He tried to convince himself that it wouldn't be that bad. That in whatever way Sanji found out about Pudding it was quick. The extravagant expanse of balcony was lit up by the light filtering through Pudding's bedroom window. An open window. A window that was perfect for passing gifts through. Sanji thought that had to be a positive sign, right? But he still hesitated, if only to think his fiancée could get mad if she thought he might be peeping. His blush deepened, but he shrugged it off. What am I thinking? We're gonna be husband and wife tomorrow. I'll be seeing that sort of thing all the time. Nothing wrong with getting a sneak peek. The only sneak peek he'd be getting is her fist to his face, Frankie knew. Why do I feel this isn't going to go as well as he's hoping? Nami muttered. As he approached the window, Pudding's soft, sweet giggle glided from the room. Good. She's well enough to laugh, at least. He lifted the flowers to place on the windowsill first as he peered in, ready to charm. What he saw, however, was Pudding shaking behind her hands and, diagonal from her, sat Reiju. Reiju? The sight of his sister baffled Sanji at first. But suddenly the air shifted. Pudding's hands dropped as she threw her head back with a laugh. A laugh that was like nothing he'd heard from the girl before. It was arrogant and deceitful and jarring. And, were the Straw Hats seeing things? Because there at the center of her forehead was clearly another. She has 3 eyes, Frankie, Usopp, Robin, and Zoro exclaimed in unison. Oh, did we forget to mention that? Brooke wondered idly. Luffy laughed. Pretty weird, right? Sanji froze in place even as he was thrown off his axis. He was unable to comprehend, as she angled more towards him, the cruel smirk he was seeing on this gentle woman's face and the malicious gleam in her once soft eyes. Wait, where'd her 3rd eye go? Usopp yelped. Did he not see the 3rd eye? This couldn't be Pudding. The woman in that room was a completely different person. You can't honestly be that naive, Pudding chortled, as if directly responding to Sanji's thoughts. And in that moment, realization hit all the Straw Hats at once. Pudding's simple words had let it all sink in and now their bodies had promptly chilled over. Hearts constricting. Speeding up, only to falter again. Oh, no, Nami whispered, eyes widening. Please, no. Pudding leaned closer to the pink-haired Vinsmoke she was entertaining, who was now very distinctly bound to the chair she was sitting on. Wrapped tight by one of Pudding's sentient subordinates. A blue jelly-like creature Sanji remembered was named Nitro. When Pudding spoke, her voice was void of any of the sugary smoothness she was associated with. She laughed in Reiju's face. You think I'd marry that lowlife pirate? Ha! You must be out of your freaking mind. Not a chance in hell. Her words hit Sanji harder than a cannonball. Every Straw Hat fumed in disbelief. This was how it happened. Pudding's true motives were being revealed to him, like this. I'm one of Mama's favorites, you know, especially for my acting. Sanji was unable to move. Unable to breathe as his heart became a point of chaos. Reality crashed around him heavier than the barrage of rain. In fact, Mama cares for me so much it's almost overbearing, said Pudding. But fool some stupid man from time to time and the old bag is happy. And it was almost too easy tricking the Straw Hats, ha ha ha. The fooled Straw Hats scowled in embarrassment and betrayal, and the other half glowered in their defense. Only my closest family knows what my true nature really is. Pudding laughed wickedly. You people are so gullible, and Germa 66 is supposed to be an evil army? Keep living in your fantasy world, you twits. You deserve this. Blood dripped from Reiju's leg, splattering onto the carpet as Nitro the jelly squeezed her tighter, and the magic carpet, Rabian, hovered over her with an amused grin. Sanji wanted to wonder how hurt his sister was, tried to remember why Reiju shouldn't be bleeding at all with her modifications, but Sanji couldn't think straight. His mind was a mess, and nothing was making sense. Mama only wants 2 things from you, Pudding told her captured visitor, a hand on her hip. Your vast army of clone soldiers, and your scientific technology. Seems Big Mom and Hollowell have something in common, Frankie said. And our poor brother Sanji keeps getting caught up in their games. All eyes dropped from the screen to the quietly observant doctor and questionant mind specialists. Hollowell had the nerve to smirk over his pointy shoulder, handlebar mustache shaking as he laughed. Tishishishi. Perhaps if your friend wasn't such a weak target. The distinct sound of steel being unsheathed cut him off. The hell did you say? Zoro snarled, ready to push himself further onto his feet. But Sanji's memories were too challenging to divert from at the moment, and the screen of memories had recaptured everyone's attention. Do you always listen to mommy? Reiju had dispassionately huffed, turning away from Pudding's haughty stare. My, such defiance, Pudding sighed. Walking back toward her couch by the window Sanji was hidden beyond. The cook's back was stiff against the wall at the edges of the windowsill. That is exactly why we don't need you, Pudding continued. The entirety of the Germa kingdom is anchored within our borders right now. Like flies drawn to rotting fruit, the political marriage was meant to entice you. It worked so well. You took the bait just as Mama planned. And at the wedding tomorrow, the entire Vinsmoke family will be eliminated. Pink lightning flashed, silhouetting Sanji's still form outside. His face was hidden in shadow, and the cigarette he had lit inside sizzled out from the rain. Oh, this is so bad, Usopp groaned. His whole family was duped, Frankie realized. Germa 66 believed they were the ones playing Big Mom by tying Sanji to her in the first place, Robin said. But it doesn't seem they were prepared for the chance she'd be playing her own game that could reach beyond their so-called sacrificial lamb. Not wise. From his shadowed corner, Ashvin snorted at such an embarrassing display by the Germa kingdom. He pushed his violet glasses up higher on his nose. Germa has the brains for war and technology, but political strategy seems to be their weak point. Tishishishi. Quite the pity for them, said Hollowell. This was what Pudding told us about in the library, Luffy said, and Nami nodded. However, she was more concerned about Sanji's mental state at the moment. She hadn't known any of this happened. Sanji's being punished for the sins of the family that disowned him and tortured him, Chopper sobbed. But this is the worst way to possibly find out about Pudding. The Straw Hat's grimaces sharpened, and Zoro's grip around Enma's hilt strengthened. Inside, Pudding held up a pistol in one hand, and a candy in the other, unwrapping it with her teeth. The formidable Germa 66 once conquered the North Blue by force, she trilled. It's hard to believe that tomorrow your regime of terror abruptly ends with a hail of bullets. Pudding placed the candy bullet into the pistol and cocked the gun. The wedding will be soaked red with your blood. Bang. The impending bloodbath amused her to no end. By the way, I would appreciate one last favor. Can you make it a point not to create too big of a mess when you die tomorrow? Just be mindful of the splatter. If that wedding cake gets one drop of blood on it, Mama will be livid, and no one wants that. Chopper shuddered with his own PTSD. She'd tear the place down out of fury. And she did, Chopper quipped. But that's not important right now. His watery eyes overflowed. Sanji can't be okay hearing all this. Pudding aimed her pistol at her bedroom wall and pulled the trigger. The candy bullet penetrated the sweet stone with no resistance, whizzing past Sanji, who didn't so much as blink. Zoro zeroed in on the cook every chance he got, watching, waiting for the inevitable. See this? Pudding said, showcasing her smoking pistol. It's a .36 caliber Walker percussion pistol. The bullets it fires are called candy jackets. They are designed to be able to penetrate through the toughest armor and shields. As you can see, she glanced at Reiju's bloody leg. It works rather well. Even your tempered body can be pierced by these. The Hollowell scientists were intrigued by such strange technology that was proven capable of damaging Germa 66s. Just knowing there was somebody out there who had already managed it was a promising discovery among Germa's other weaknesses. Reiju looked away from the harassing Charlotte, which prompted Pudding to antagonize further. She smirked at the stubborn Vinsmoke, changing her tactics. Can you imagine Sanji's face when he sees the girl he trusted pointing a gun right between his eyes? Delicious? The Straw Hats grew tense and instantly silent, not even daring to breathe. Nitro let out a loud laugh. It's gonna be so good. That sad sack actually believes that you have real feelings for him, Rabian joined in. The duo cackled as Sanji, despondent and frozen, absorbed every cruel word spoken. Pudding joined her friends. He doesn't suspect a thing, she chortled, the poor fool. Sanji's body finally moved. His arms slowly dropped at his sides, and the flowers he had carefully collected fell to his feet, sinking into the soggy grass. He tilted his shadowed face toward the sky, frown deepening with every brutal truth. Reality splintering with every mocking laugh. Sanji. His memories weren't giving the Straw Hats a clear picture of their cook's face, and they struggled to get a glimpse of his expression. To get some insight as to what he was feeling, because it sure as hell couldn't be good, but they felt they needed to know. Needed to see him. The ordeal was much worse than any of them imagined it could have been like. Not only was Sanji learning the truth in such an awful way, but he also had to listen to them ridicule him on top of it all? I wonder what kind of face he'll make, Pudding chuckled. Oh, I know. Maybe something like this. She contorted her face into one of ridiculous shock, and her friend snorted. You really nailed it. I can see it now. This is messed up, Nami whispered, voice barely audible. It was harsh and excessive and so completely undeserved that the crew felt a collective nausea roll through them. Or how about this one? Ready? Pudding's smirk faded as her face suddenly transformed into a mimic of the blonde prince's swollen face from after his brothers beat him to a pulp. Pee-pee Pudding my sweet, she mocked, even slurring her words. Robin closed her eyes and turned away, seething. Brook glared daggers, never having been more insulted in his long life. Usopp's teeth hurt from clenching his jaw so hard, and Nami's palms were red from her nails digging into them as she shook. Frankie scowled at how super uncool this was, every muscle in his cybernetic body twitching for a fight. "Why?" Chopper whispered, quivering. "Why are they doing this?" Luffy's face was as shadowed as Sanji's. Pissed. Because it didn't matter who they were to you. You didn't make fun of a person's feelings. You didn't mock people for being kind. And Zoro hadn't moved an inch. Hadn't breathed. Enma still unsheathed, as sharp and solid as Zoro's good eye was on the screen. The blade rumbled in a silent, raging bloodlust the same way its wielder was. Zoro felt paralyzed even as his veins burned. Reiju refused to even look at whatever faces the heartless girl was making as her two odd friends laughed and laughed and laughed. Pudding walked back over to her with a chilling determination. "Come on, why aren't you looking? This is hilarious," she pouted. "Don't like us making fun of your brother, huh?" Nitro tittered, taking the cigar from his jelly mouth. "Live a little. Laughing'll take the edge off." "You got nothing to lose," Rabian scathingly agreed. Pudding's voice dropped as a wicked gleam entered her eyes. "You want to know how he proposed? It was hilarious. And pretty embarrassing, honestly." "Oh, are you kidding?" Nami sneered, wrapping her arms around herself and rocking forward. "Don't do this to him." He pulled his face pack off, Pudding told her. And his whole head was fat and bloated and ugly. Then, looking like some grotesque clown, he had the nerve to say, "She transformed her face back into a mimic of Sanji. To my older brothers, I'm just a failure who's showy, or some crap like that." Zoro's teeth snapped together, fingers twitching for a second blade. Nitro and Rabian couldn't control their mirth. "Ahaha. You sound exactly like that sap." "That's too much. That expression is on point. A real tragedy," Nitro added before turning to Reiju. "Are you picking up on all this irony here, Toots?" Reiju still refused to acknowledge anything, and Pudding continued her cruel Sanji impression. "Just about 13 years ago I somehow managed to escape my hellish prison, only to return and walk right back into it again." "Too funny," Rabian chortled. "That's so pathetic." The Straw Hats seethed. These were Sanji's hardest secrets, and she was callously ridiculing them. "And then he gave me the biggest puppy dog eyes," Pudding said, amused face shifting again. "That's why my adventure will end right here." She switched easily back to her regular self. "Groan. Like I give two shits about that loser." Chopper choked on a sob, furious and anguished. Pudding and her friends continued to laugh. How pathetic, it was too easy. In that moment of vulnerability, all I had to do was fake some tears and he was putty. Oh well. Men are stupid creatures. As their howling once again erupted, a bundle of pink roses drowned in the downpour beyond the open window. Sanji slowly, so slowly, pulled his lighter from his pocket. His chin was to his chest, and his blonde hair hung sopping wet across his darkened face. The Straw Hats still strained to see him, but Pudding wasn't done. "And then that fool pulled me close, just like in a cliché romance novel." The picnic basket fell limply from Sanji's grasp. And he uttered some trash in a soft whisper. Sanji flicked at his lighter. "She keeps dragging this on for what?" Usopp swallowed the lump in his throat when his voice broke. Sanji's had enough. "You're my salvation, Pudding," she mocked. "So, if you'll have me, let's get married." "Let's get married? Ahaha." The trio of tricksters burst into laughter once again, stomping their feet and wiping away tears as if the Vinsmoke Prince's heartfelt confessions were the most ridiculous sappy nonsense they'd ever heard. Sanji's fingers trembled. Flick after flick, there was no catch, not a single spark. Honestly, Pudding sighed, catching her breath. "Could you imagine a more pitiful proposal?" she cackled. Flick. Flick. Pudding sighed, waving her hand to dry her eyes. "Oh, what a riot." Flick. Flick. What kind of idiot would want a colossal failure like him? The Straw Hats' hearts shattered thinking of their cook hearing that, and something snapped in their swordsman. Zoro knew he snapped. He felt it in the way his veins pulsed with boiling bloodlust. He felt it in the way his muscles coiled with an overpowering fury. Felt it in the way he had a fierce instinct to tuck Sanji into his chest and slaughter anyone who dared to fucking look at him. And before anyone could register what the hell was happening, Zoro's cell was engulfed in a purple glow. Nami yelped in surprise, But as the edges of the deadly aura that drifted as if in tumultuous waters paid her no mind, she noticed something else happening, something odd. Hollowell and his specialists froze, wide-eyed at the demon they had in their midst. Then, just as quickly, they eased, confident in their hold on him. Ashvin huffed. Should have sedated that one like I said. Nami silently gasped, realizing they hadn't seen what she saw. Zoro, however, was quite literally growling. If he heard the word failure come out of anyone's mouth around his cook again, it was going to be the last thing that person ever fucking said. The Straw Hats, weeping and angry and overwhelmed, weren't sure whether to focus on their raging swordsman or the memories of their demoralized cook. Flick. Flick. All eyes went back to the screen. Seriously, Pudding was still chortling at all the mockery she'd thrown. The nerve of you trying to pass him off. At least bring me a proper prince to marry. Flick. 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 Give him a damn smoke, Frankie sobbed. Finally, the lighter's flame caught. There was a brief moment, at the sight of the flame, when Sanji's fingers stopped trembling. As the tip of the drenched cigarette inched closer to the heat. But then a drop of rain smothered it out with a dramatic sizzle. A deflated pause. Another attempt. Flick, flick, flick. Staring down at the lighter now, Sanji struck at it more rapidly. Desperate. Urgent. He needed something. Flick flick, but whatever he needed, he wasn't getting, was he? Flick flick flick. As the rain melted down Sanji's desolate face, so did his tears. Endless torrents as silent and relentless as this pain in his heart. His cigarette, unable to be lit, was clenched around an ever-deepening frown that cruelly dimpled his cheeks. The curl of his brows bowed tragically as he could only stare through the glistening pools in his frightened eyes. Not truly seeing. At his washed-up lighter. At his washed-up life. At his washed-up existence. Flick. Slowly, he blinked. The pools dripping in tides. FL. Ick. No more. His cigarette would hang moist and unlit, and that was that. Helplessness set in, for he had thought he at least had one ray of hope in this world, and it had been a ruse. Fake. It had been cruel and cold and exactly like the life had so long ago tried to escape from. Now he finally realized that he was surrounded by the hell on all sides. Stronger than before. Unrelenting. He was completely and utterly alone. There wasn't a single ounce of happiness destined for Sanji. Not now, not ever. The world dared him to love and then laughed in his face, and Sanji couldn't take it anymore. To anyone he ever attached himself to, he was a disappointment. He'd never live up to anybody's expectations, and maybe it was finally time he accepted that. Accepted the truth. Because it was all undisputable fact at this point. Nobody could ever love a failure like him, and he wasn't even worth the effort. Sanji, Robin, Nami, and Chopper wept. Usopp had his weeping eyes shoved into his knees, and Frankie had his hidden in his hands, and Brook had his sockets closed, also solemnly calling out for his friend. There was so much heartbreak involved it would be impossible to peel through every layer. Zoro's aura had all but vanished, and he stood there, top of his face dark with shadows as his bottom lip trembled under the sharp bite of his teeth. Luffy was watching him. But Zoro could only think of Sanji. Because if his depressing-ass thoughts had been right, Zoro wouldn't have to be affected by the shitty cook in his shitty life this fucking much. And as the tears flowed from the crew, so did they flow from the one trapped in his memories. Flowers, so preciously picked, drowned beneath puddles at Sanji's feet. And if the wicker soaked through and the food disintegrated, what did it matter anymore? The rain never let up, and Sanji, without even the relief of nicotine, gave up. Forced to feel every bit of his fucking failure of a life.